We'd never stand next to you. You are the absolute disgrace of this family." Those words echoed through the receiver, sharp and metallic, right before the line went dead. I stood frozen in the center of my hotel room, holding my phone against my ear long after the dial tone faded. "My name is Evelyn Harper. I'm 29 years old, a captain in the United States Army, and in less than 3 hours I was scheduled to step onto a heavily guarded stage in Washington, D.C. to receive the Silver Star, one of the highest military decorations for valor in combat. On my bed lay my dress uniform, pristine and crisp, decorated with the ribbon racks I'd earned through blood, sweat, and sleepless nights overseas. Beside it sat 2 gold-embossed VIP passes, meant for the proud parents who were supposed to sit in the very front row on live national television. Instead, my father, Richard, had just made it abundantly clear that my sacrifices meant nothing to him. To my parents, my entire military career was just a desperate bid for attention, a stark contrast to their prized golden child, my older brother. I stared at those 2 empty tickets, my chest tightening with a familiar dull ache. But as I looked at my reflection in the mirror, adjusting the polished brass on my collar, the sadness slowly burned away, replaced by a cold, unwavering clarity. I wasn't going to let their toxicity taint the proudest moment of my life. And I certainly wasn't going to let those front row seats sit empty. With steady fingers, I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 3 years. My mother's estranged sister, Aunt Eleanor. To understand why my father hung up on me, you have to understand the hierarchy of the Harper family. Growing up, the sun rose and set on my older brother, Julian. He was 2 years older, charismatic, and gifted with the kind of smooth charm that made my parents envision a corporate dynasty. My father poured every cent of his savings, his connections, and his pride into Julian's business ventures. When Julian wanted to launch an elite marketing firm right out of college, my parents mortgaged their home to finance it. When that failed, they quietly covered his debts and called it a valuable learning experience. Meanwhile, my choices were treated as a disappointment. When I enlisted after college, my mother wept, not out of fear for my safety, but out of shame that her daughter was choosing manual labor over a quiet, respectable corporate job. While Julian was buying custom suits on my parents' dime, I was crawling through mud in officer candidate school, earning my commission through relentless grit. The real breaking point happened just 2 weeks before my award ceremony. Julian's latest luxury real estate venture had collapsed under a mountain of unpaid debts and shady accounting. Facing potential lawsuits, my parents called me with a demand, not a request. I was expected to hand over my entire military savings, funds I had set aside over years of deployments, to bail Julian out. When I calmly refused to fund my brother's gross incompetence, my father's warmth evaporated instantly. He accused me of being selfish, cold-hearted, and jealous of Julian's superior potential. Denying them my money was, in their eyes, the ultimate betrayal. Refusing to attend my Silver Star ceremony was their way of trying to punish me, to force me back into my place as the invisible, obedient daughter. But they had severely miscalculated. When Aunt Eleanor arrived at the grand auditorium in downtown Washington, she looked like a deer in the headlights. Wearing a modest blue dress she'd bought at a local department store, she held the gold-embossed pass like it was made of spun glass. For years, my parents had ostracized her simply because she'd chosen a humble life as a small-town schoolteacher instead of chasing corporate status. But when I pulled her into a tight hug backstage, her hands trembled with pure, unadulterated pride. "Evelyn," she whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. "I wouldn't have missed this for the world." Minutes later, an usher escorted Eleanor down the center aisle, placing her squarely in the front row VIP section, surrounded by 4-star generals, cabinet members, and high-ranking government officials. As the brass band echoed through the hall, signaling the start of the live national broadcast, I stood at attention on the main stage. Bright television lights warmed my face, and giant screens projected the ceremony to millions of viewers across the country. As the master of ceremonies read my combat citation, detailing the grueling 3-hour firefight where I'd risked my life to pull 3 wounded soldiers out of an active kill zone, the broadcast cameras panned across the audience. On screens nationwide, viewers saw the stark contrast: the empty, vacant space where my parents were supposed to be sitting, and right beside it, Aunt Eleanor, sitting tall with her hands clasped together, tears flowing freely down her cheeks as she cheered for me. My parents thought their absence would publicly humiliate me. Instead, the camera captured the quiet dignity of the woman who actually cared. The applause swelled, but before I could step back from the podium, the Secretary of Defense cleared his throat and stepped up to the microphone. The scripted portion of the broadcast was over, but he raised a hand to pause the applause, turning his attention directly toward the front row. "Today," the Secretary announced, his voice booming through the speakers, "we do not just honor Captain Harper for her bravery, we also recognize the military families who stand behind our heroes, the bedrock of our armed forces." He gestured toward the VIP section, where Aunt Eleanor sat clutching her program. "Through a newly established Pentagon initiative," he continued, "funded by a private defense grant, the official immediate kin attending today's ceremony is being awarded a $2 million endowment to oversee the newly established Harper Foundation for Veteran Support. Furthermore, this honor includes the historical deed to the former military Crest Estate in Virginia, designated for the honoree's designated kin system." A collective gasp echoed through the auditorium. The camera panned sharply to Aunt Eleanor's stunned face on live national television. Because my parents had voluntarily surrendered their seats, Aunt Eleanor had signed in as my official attending kin on the Pentagon's registry just 20 minutes before the broadcast. On screens across the nation, millions watched as the Secretary officially presented Eleanor with the ceremonial plaque and crest. Tears streamed down her face as she stepped toward the microphone, giving a moving, heartfelt speech about how true family isn't defined by blood or greed, but by unconditional support and loyalty. My parents had refused to stand with me, and in doing so, they had just watched my humble aunt step into an extraordinary legacy on live television. The moment the broadcast concluded, I was escorted backstage into the quiet privacy of the green room. As soon as I pulled my phone out from my pocket, the screen lit up violently with a relentless wall of notifications. 49 missed calls. Dozens of text messages were pouring in, scrolling so fast the screen was practically a blur. Every single one was from my father, my mother, and Julian. They had watched the entire ceremony live from their living room. They had seen the Secretary of Defense present the $2 million endowment, watched the nation applaud, and witnessed Aunt Eleanor, the sister my mother had spent decades despising, receive the historical Virginia estate deed on national television. They realized in an instant that by trying to punish me, they had publicly humiliated themselves and thrown away millions. Just as I stared at the screen, call number 50 flashed across the display. I pressed answer and switched the phone to speaker, setting it down on the glass table. "Evelyn, are you insane?" My father's voice exploded through the speaker, breathless and trembling with rage. "What the hell was Eleanor doing in our seats? That endowment belongs to this family. That estate belongs to your brother. You call her right now and tell her to sign those papers over to Julian, or so help me." "Hello to you too, Dad," I interrupted, my voice as calm and smooth as ice. "I thought you said you'd never stand next to me. Isn't that what you told me 3 hours ago?" The silence on the line was deafening. For 5 whole seconds, my father couldn't even form a sentence. When he finally spoke, all the bluster and anger had drained from his voice, replaced by a desperate, sickeningly sweet tone. "Evelyn, honey, please," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "You know I was just upset earlier. Julian is in deep trouble, Evelyn. His creditors are going to ruin him. That $2 million endowment and the Virginia estate, it was meant for your family, for your brother. Eleanor doesn't need any of that. She's just a schoolteacher. My mother's voice panicked in the background, crying out to the phone. Evelyn, think about your family's future. Tell Eleanor to give us the deed. We're your real parents. I looked over at Aunt Eleanor, who was standing in the doorway of the green room, holding her official Pentagon documents with serene composure. She gave me a quiet, reassuring nod. "You made your choice, Dad," I said, stepping closer to the phone. "You decided that blood only mattered when you could extract money from me, but Eleanor was the one who signed as my attending kin. The grant and the estate are legally and permanently in her name. The paperwork was finalized live on air. Neither you nor Julian will ever touch a single cent of it." "You disowned daughter!" My father began to scream, but I didn't let him finish. "Don't ever call this number again," I said softly, and ended the call for good. Within weeks, Julian's fraud exploded into the local news, while my parents were left to explain to their entire social circle why they were absent from their own daughter's historic honor. 3 months have passed since that life-changing day in Washington, D.C. Today, Aunt Eleanor and I stand on the porch of the historic Virginia estate, not as a symbol of wealth, but as the bustling headquarters of the Harper Foundation for Veteran Support. Using the endowment, Eleanor retired from teaching to manage the foundation full-time, providing housing assistance, legal aid, and career counseling to young service members rebuilding their lives. Walking away from my toxic family wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I learned that true family isn't defined by shared DNA or demanding expectations. It's built by the people who show up for you when the lights are off and no one else is watching. My parents chose greed and conditional love, and in the end, they were left with empty hands and quiet rooms. Meanwhile, Eleanor and I built a legacy that will help thousands of people for generations to come. I'm standing tall, living my life on my own terms, surrounded by genuine love and purpose. Now, I want to ask you, if you were in my shoes, would you have ever forgiven your parents? Or would you have handed that VIP seat away, just like I did? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen right now for another mind-blowing tale that will completely surprise you. Thank you for watching.